But we got to preview the Eagles season, and we will go throughout the NFL throughout the course of the show looking at this season coming up. So excited for the season to start. All offseason, we've discussed this team. And tonight, Brodes, it's time for us to go on the record.
Okay.
We got to go on the record tonight. And 3 questions for the audience here. Final record, where will the Eagles end up in the division? And where does this season end? And if you want to get in, 215-592-9494, that is how you get in to start the show. And I'll just start here, Brodes, and with my general assessment of this team. I think this team is very talented. I think there is a really high upside. Best skill position group they've had in my lifetime. Not probably. I could say definitely, considering the running backs and the 2 receivers on the outside. They've upgraded the coordinators. I still believe Nick Sirianni is a decent head coach, but I have concerns about this team. I think the D-line's a major issue. I think the offensive line could be a bigger issue than we made it out to be. And how much can the skill guys make up for that? Like, that's going to be a really big question with this team. And this is where I landed. I landed on the Eagles finishing this year 11-6. I think they win the NFC East. I think it's going to be really close between them and Dallas. But hey, nobody repeats. So I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the Eagles there. And I think they lose in the divisional round of the playoffs.
Whoa.
In Detroit.
What?
To the Lions.
Ew.
That's where I am. 11-6 NFC East champs losing the divisional round. Maybe not a satisfying ending, but that's what I have.
That's disgusting. I can't believe it.
That was a visceral grunt by you there.
Sick. Makes me sick.
Oh, I thought you were saying something other than sick there for a second.
No.
Okay.
That would get us in trouble.
Good.
All right, so I'm not really that off on what you're saying outside of the finish of the season. I agree that there are definitely some issues with the lack of pressure. I do believe we are going to be screaming very loudly about the lack of production from Bryce Huff, from Nolan Smith, probably Josh Sweat. My guess is probably Jordan Davis, and then Brandon Graham will get a free pass because he's on his farewell tour, and that's really what it's all about. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of production up front, and I've been knocked on these airwaves pretty recently about the offensive line because everyone points out that you got your left side shored up, you got Lane Johnson going over there at right tackle, but what if one guy goes down? I don't like the depth. So we're on similar pages there. I have them going 12-5. I have them winning the NFC East. But the only difference is I do have them going a step further because I do really trust this offense and Kellen Moore's schematics and Jalen. I think they go on the road in the NFC Championship game and lose there 1 game away from a Super Bowl appearance, even with all the flaws that I'm about to expose over the next 3 hours.
So you have them going to the championship game?
Yes, on the road and losing.
Who would you have them losing to?
San Fran.
Okay.
Disgusting, I know.
Hey, I mean, they're the odds-on favorite in the NFC, but want people's takes on this. What's the record for the Eagles? Where do they finish in the East? And where does this season end? 215-592-9494 if you want to get in and start the show here. And this is the thing, Brodes. And I do generally feel good about this team, but in the end, I think it's a good team. I don't think it's a Super Bowl team. I think the potential is there. Sure, we all know the talent. But in the end, I think there are still glaring holes. I think there are glaring holes, mainly on both sides of the lines, that the Eagles didn't address throughout the course of the season. And again, the opportunity's there in the NFC. You look at San Francisco, they're really good. The odds are, I mean, going back to the Super Bowl, really year after year and going to the championship game year after year, they've got to have a fall off at some point. Is that going to be this year? Could be. I mean, you look at a team like Detroit, they're talented, specifically on offense. That's not a great defense. I mean, they have their imperfections as well. But when it comes down to it, I don't have the confidence that this D-line will get enough pressure to beat the best teams. So much experience in the back end, too many questions for me up front offensively to fully believe. And I think it'll be a good season. I think it'll be a fun season to watch. They're going to be a fun team to watch. But in the end, I think there are too many holes. I would characterize the Eagles as good, not great going into this year.
I think that's fair. No, I really do. I think that's totally fair. It's objective. And one thing, too, that we haven't even highlighted yet, which was actually some drama not too long ago this morning with Jeff McClain reporting it on the Inquirer about Devin White, who Who knows what we even have at linebacker? Sure, technically, maybe, and I'm using air quotes here, Nakobe Dean outperformed Devin White. If they actually feel that way, okay, I'm not buying a damn thing right now on that. But is it because Nakobe Dean just performed better than someone that got benched by Todd Bowles and said he's not even worthy of playing anymore? Or is Nakobe Dean actually a real legitimate weapon that deserves to wear the green dot on his helmet? Because if he's just a guy that's winning by default, it's him and Bourne playing in the middle of the field. And what are the odds that we can rely on those two to do their jobs, especially if we're not getting the pressure up front that you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the biggest questions with this team is that defense and getting pressure on the quarterback. And if you want to get in, 215-592-9494 is how you join the show. Final record, where the Eagles finish in the NFC East. And where does this season end? We're broadcasting live from the Tasty Cake Studios, 94.1 WIP, HD1 Philadelphia. Again, broadcasting live from the Tasty Cake Studios. And I want to get our producer, Francisco Rojas's take on this. I know, shocking.
Well, I just want to make sure he's okay physically.
Yeah,
I'm great.
He's fine. He injured his eye the other night. He, got hit in a mosh pit. I know he was telling you about it minutes ago. I mean, what a wuss this guy is.
Unbelievable.
What a wuss. Everyone's scared of me.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
I'm sure whoever kicked you in the face was really concerned that you were going to do something
back. It was a windmill fist to the face.
On purpose, probably.
It was like a Vince Carter tomahawk dunk right to the face.
Well, we're glad that you're recovering. It looks a lot better than it looked on Monday.
I think it does too, yeah.
On
it's
Monday,
still scary, though.
On Monday, it looked like he had, pink eye.
Oh, I wish I saw this.
And I was pretty, I was pretty hesitant to be around him. But then when I heard it was just a mosh pit accident, it was a little easy.
We're right back at it tomorrow night. I'm going to a show again. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Got to get back out there.
Softball, and then go right to a show right afterwards.
I'd rather watch you play softball. See what that looks like.
Come out for both.
There you go. So what do you have, Francisco? Final record, where they finish? Where does the season end?
All right, so I'm going 12-5. Kind of was going back and forth between 11 wins, maybe 13 if the defense kind of maybe performs above expectations. But I'm going 12. I think the offense is just too good for them not to at least win 12 games. I think they get to the divisional round and they lose. And I don't think that's necessarily a horrible thing. I just think this is a kind of I don't want to use the word, but a bit of a retooling year.
Uh-oh.
So, Brodes a big Flyers guy. We know about retooling. So
not a rebuild, a retool.
A retool. So that's kind of where I'm at with this team. 12-5, lose in the divisional round.
Yeah, and so it sounds like all of us are pretty much on the same train here. 11-12 wins, divisional round for Francisco and I, NFC Championship game for you, Brodes. I think the thing is, by most metrics we'd look at and we'd say, okay, successful season. I mean, this team's going deep into the playoffs. They're winning double-digit games. But with where the expectations are, I don't think anything less than a Super Bowl is going to satisfy people.
Absolutely no. So I actually don't know if losing in the divisional round would be a success, but I think you can swing an NFC Championship appearance. And we'll need to see the context, of course, but from a bland statement and a bird's eye view, I think you could sell that as we are continuing sustained success and let's keep cracking at this. So Francisco used the word retool. Every time we throw that word around, though, one thing I like to do is pretend we're asking Howie Roseman. And I mean off the record, not where he has to give you public tone and just to satisfy the fans. I mean, when Howie's sitting at the kitchen table with his wife and being honest and open about everything, how do you feel this team should finish? I think he would tell you Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that's sort of the expectation I have to crawl into the season with. That's at least how I view it.
No, I totally agree. And Howie was on the station last week, the morning show, and he said the same thing, and I don't think he was lying. I mean, Howie comes on and he says, yeah, I think this is a Super Bowl team. We desire to be a Super Bowl team, and that should be the expectation. I want to get there. I really do. I want to buy all into this team, but I look at it and I just think the holes that they have, and every team has holes. There's no team that's perfect. But where the Eagles have their weaknesses, I don't think they will be able to overcome them to ultimately win the Super Bowl. And that's why I think, yeah, you look at that second tier of teams in the NFL, the Eagles are there with a handful of them. Like, they're probably somewhere in that 5 to 8 range. But in the end, when it comes down to it, do they have the pass rush in the postseason to get to some of the best quarterbacks? I don't believe they do.
No.
Do they have the offensive line up front that's going to be able to protect? I hope, but we have guys up front with Cam Jurgens playing center, Mekhi Becton playing guard, that have never played those positions at the NFL level before. It's just a lot of leaps of faith that they're asking us to take, and I just can't get there in the end.
Sure. No, I understand. And actually, the more I think about the defense as well, and I know that when I talk, it definitely sounds that I'm super negative on this team, but I can see them going to the NFC Championship game. So it sounds very hypocritical, but I believe that much in the offense, to be fair. But when we look at the defense, we already mentioned how the pass rush is going to annoy us. We don't know about the linebackers. The safety position, the injuries are real. C.J. Gardner-Johnson gets banged up every single season. Reed Blankenship was hurt at the end of last year, and he's just like a fine third safety more than he is your like go-to safety guy in my eyes. Sidney Brown was hurt last year, and Cooper DeJean is a Swiss Army knife, but he's nowhere even close to a polished guy right now. So if you keep looking even deeper at it, there Avonte Maddox, if they want to put him at safety, he's always injured. The safeties have a major concern too. I guess the only place I feel super comfortable about defensively would be, I mean, I'm definitely buying into the Quinyon Mitchell slot hype, but Darius Slay and maybe Isaiah Rodgers on the outside with Quinyon Mitchell and those three positions, I feel real comfortable with. Everywhere else is questions.
Oh, when you look at this defense, the defense comes down to one thing. They need Jalen Carter to be one of the best defensive players in football. If Jalen Carter's not one of the best defensive players in football, I don't see any way that this defense is very good, even with the corners on the back end, because we know the holes they have at edge rusher. I don't know. I'm not a huge Bryce Huff believer.
No.
They need Jalen Carter to, I don't know about be Aaron Donald level, but they need him to be a massive difference maker. If he's not, I just don't see how they hold up front.
He needs to be the guy that when other teams, other offensive coordinators are studying the game plan of the Eagles, they highlight and circle and say, he can't annihilate us. It needs to be that level of a focus, that level of an emphasis. And the problem is the bye week is so early on that after you get through maybe week 8, week 9, you're 10 games into the season, you don't have the luxury of getting guys like him or Jordan Davis a reset week. And we saw last year how troubling that was after a certain point of the season.
Right, and I know this sounds crazy, and we'll get to the phones in a second here, considering you have guys like Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, A.J. Brown. But I look at this team, and I think if you asked me, of players on this team you can least afford to lose due to injury, aside from Jalen Hurts, I'd probably have Jalen Carter number 2.
Yeah.
I'd probably say he's the second guy who if you say you cannot lose this guy, Jalen Carter's number 2 behind the quarterback.
Yeah, it has to be, right? I mean, I guess just because of what the numbers say with the Lane Johnson wins and loss thing, I think that definitely is something you could bring up. But yeah, I mean, you got to remember, even last year, I know people say Fletcher Cox can't play anymore, but when he's not on the field, it's going to be a major difference on what you get on that up front defensive line, even for Jalen Carter's perspective, because other teams know Fletcher's been in the league long, and he still did have some left in the tank. It was little, but he still had some left in the tank. You remove him, and if Jalen Carter is removed, you really have literally nothing. Milton Williams, come on, that is not going to cut it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I like Milton Williams. I think he can be a
rotational piece.
Right, he's a rotational piece, and I think has the ability to maybe be more than that, but hey, we don't know. We haven't seen it. And as far as Fletcher Cox goes, I think Fletcher Cox had a pretty good year last year.
Me too.
Yeah, he was a big part of that defense and what they were doing. But it's going to be really interesting, and want people to go on the record tonight. Final win total, where the Eagles finished in the NFC East. Where and how does this season end? 215-592-9494 is how you join the show. And throughout the show, I have a couple of questions, Brodes, that I've kind of thought of and come up with as far as, being the telling point of what ends up happening with this season. So we'll get to one of those in a minute. We'll kind of throw them out there throughout the show. I think some of the big things that are going to determine the outcome of this Eagles season. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. First, let's go to the phones. Go to our buddy Warren in Gwinnett Valley. What's up there, Warren?
Hey, TK. Hey, Brodes. How we doing there today?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Good Phillies win, but I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah, I'm nervous about Bryce. I know we haven't gotten to that part yet, but I am nervous about his elbow/wrist.
I'm worried all the way through because the team has to perform well, with the good teams when you get into the playoffs, and those cold winters there in the playoffs, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk Eagles and get in with you guys. I'm nervous beyond the starters, including and especially Jalen Hurts, that if you lose Jalen to an injury and you have to put in Kenny Pickett, I'd like to hear what you guys are going to say about that.
It depends. If you mean that Jalen is out for a significant amount of time, then yeah, I'll be hitting all sorts of alarm buttons. If I needed Kenny Pickett so Jalen Hurts could maybe help out an ankle injury for 2 weeks and we have to play, I don't know where that would line up in the schedule, but do I think, I know the preseason was bad, but with these skill position players and with Kellen Moore in a regular season game, if we need to rely on a backup quarterback for 2 or 3 weeks, can he put you in a position to compete in a game? I still have faith that that can happen. So it depends on the severity of the Hurts injury.
Absolutely. And beyond Hurts, the other players that you just mentioned, Jalen Carter and so forth, that behind them, there's really nobody, I don't think, that's going to be able to handle the pressure and have the skills to be able to hold up. So I would stay more on the 10-7 side than any higher than that for wins. And if they get in as a wild card, so be it. I think that's still perfectly fine.
And I think that's fair, Warren. I really think anything from, 9, I guess, might be a little low, even though I think it could happen. Anywhere from 9 wins to 14 wins, I don't think is crazy with this team. I think there's so much variability there with what could happen, the way this is all going to work out.
Yeah, these teams, this team, both offense and defense, because they have no preseason, they haven't played anything at game speed. I have a feeling that patience is going to be a virtue to watch this team be able to pick it up game by game. But I'm not going to panic in the first, second, or third games if everybody can stay healthy. And it looks like that they can pick up the flow and all the new plays and everything that the team has to do to gel together. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I hear you, Warren. 215-592-9494 if you want to get in. But I also have a few questions that I wanted to throw out to you and the audience, Brodes, throughout the course of the show in terms of this team and, how this season is going to play out. I think largely will be determined by how these questions are answered throughout the course of the year. And the first thing I'll throw at you is this past offseason, a very different one for the Eagles. They were unconventional. They did things much differently. Do you think that the Eagles prioritized the right things this offseason?
Yes, I did. Maybe not all of them, but I don't know if in the offseason you could literally clean up every little detail. But you did a damn good job with Landon Dickerson and Mailata, with the wide receivers getting paid. You see what happened with the market with all these other teams that were dealing with controversy, Dallas and the 49ers, and a lot of these teams had to deal with that, and Howie Roseman got out in front of it, so you were able to do that. You bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and you cleaned up all the nonsense with the inexperienced coordinators. There's two that are still very questionable in my eyes, and that's, did they do the right thing with the head coach? And I don't know where they are with linebacker. But ultimately, when you look at a lot of what they did, and that's probably... See, once again, I'm talking out loud here. This is probably just like a setting up the organization for a long run here, more so than just specifically this season, because shoring up your offensive line and signing your wide receivers help you in the next 3-4 year window more so than it does for this particular season, if that makes sense. But I still have to give Howie Roseman and the Eagles a nod in the right direction, give them 2 thumbs up and say, for the most part, you absolutely did prioritize the right things.
And this is the thing. Like, it was obviously a departure, in my mind, from what they've done. I mean, paying a big running back, investing in young cornerbacks, taking cornerbacks for your first 2 picks in the draft, bringing back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. In so many ways, these decisions will determine the outcome of this season. And I look at Saquon and Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, they should help this team. I mean, absolutely, they're talented players. But I don't think they invested properly because I think it came at the expense of the lines. Like, you could have drafted a pass rusher. You could have, with that money that you used to bring in Saquon Barkley, potentially extended Hassan Reddick and kept him around.
I wanted that.
You could have drafted interior offensive line help. And it's the one thing about this offseason that I have struggled to get on board with here is these being the right investments. because I feel like they've departed from a philosophy that's largely worked. And here was Ron Jaworski yesterday on the morning show talking to Joe DeCamera and John Ritchie about the lines of this team, the offensive and defensive lines, and Jaws' take on where they are entering this season.
What issue is top of mind for you in any way, positive or negative, with this team?
I'm going to go to my basic fundamental belief in how you win football games. I don't care what area you're talking about. You have to have a physical element to your offense and your defense. Before I came on to show you guys talk about the defensive side, and there's no doubt, if you can't stop the run, you're beating nobody. If you can't run the football, you're beating nobody. Yeah, you can be 9-8, you can be 10-7, but if you want to be a world championship team, you better be able to stop the run and have a physical element, a violent element to your game. And I want to find out if this team has that physical, violent element, particularly on the defensive side. Is Jordan Davis going to come through? Is Jalen Carter going to play up to their ability? We're a little light in the seat when you start looking at linebackers and defensive ends and edge rushers, as they're now called. If you can't play a physical game, and we're going to find out if this team can play physical, because Green Bay, to me, with Josh Jacobs, they're going to run the football. They're going to run the football. You can talk about Jordan Love all you want. They're going to want to run the football. So if you don't have a physical element to your game, you're not going to be a championship football team. You
sound a bit concerned about that. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes. Yeah. And I was concerned about last year. We spoke about last year on the show many times. Teams were pounding the football on us because we were light in the seat on the edges, and people took advantage of that. And our secondary didn't enter the box, which by the way, I'm a big Vic Fangio fan. I think Vic will solve some of the issues schematically on defense. He can't play, but Vic will not give up big plays, and he will give you that 3-yard game, but he won't give you the big play. That's how Vic will operate. He'll scheme a lot of things very well. But at the end of the day, you've got to be physical.
And that's the thing that worries me the most. Like, I think they're going to be an extremely exciting team to watch, but in the end, it makes me uncomfortable because the Eagles are always a team that is built through the lines. They always take care of that stuff first, and it does worry me the fact that they seemingly departed from a lot of those philosophies this offseason.
It's fair, and you're kind of swaying me a little bit here because I do agree that going and paying Saquon Barkley is the exact opposite. What normally happens is the Eagles, they utilize a draft pick to go get some stud running back for 1 year, and then some foolish team ends up paying that person the bag, and then you replenish him with somebody else, or you go draft someone in the 4th round, or whatever it is. So you're right, but I do think that Saquon Barkley is in a tier of closer, at least, to a Christian McCaffrey and that level of running back that can really change the dynamic of your offense compared to, I don't know, just paying Miles Sanders like Carolina did or something along those lines. So I do agree that they went a little outside of the norm, but I also could understand that now is the time to maybe go Quinyon Mitchell, or now is a time to go get young secondary players, because you never do. Once in a while, I think it is okay maybe to get a foundation there, and then next year you go right back to your norm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know, and it could work. Like, it could work phenomenally. I mean, when you look at bringing in a Saquon Barkley, and I think the Miles Sanders point is probably the best example of why this could be a home run, because you look at Miles Sanders last year, who was extremely productive here behind this offensive line. He goes to Carolina. He does nothing. I mean, we just finished up a fantasy draft a little bit ago.
You take him?
Miles Sanders goes undrafted in every league. Like, the guy can't even get on the field anymore. And if this offensive line made Miles Sanders what he was in Philadelphia, I mean, yeah, of course. Even though I still, from a practical perspective, don't think giving that kind of money to Saquon is the financially responsible thing to do.
I agree with you.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't extremely excited to see it.
Yeah, no, but I do agree with you. I think I remember at the time of the signing, you were getting a little bit of some hate from the people, were you not?
Yeah, I'm still getting hate for it.
But no, I do think from a remove the emotions of wanting to see Saquon Barkley in a Kelly Green jersey running for 200 yards a game and all these touchdowns, if you are just strictly speaking Howie Roseman cap and does it make the most sense, the difference is, though, they view him, and I'm not telling you I feel this way, even though I guess I kind of do, but they view him as more of an offensive weapon and not so much just a running back. And if that's the case, and they utilize him in a way in this offense where he's more than just what a running back does, and I have to imagine that will be the case, then it will be financially responsible. But I get it. I do actually acknowledge where you're coming from. It's everything the Eagles always don't do. They never do that. So why are they doing it now? They like to zig when everyone zags, though. So maybe they're up to something. Maybe they're doing what is, I don't want to say next because there's only so many Christian McCaffreys and Barkleys in the world, but ultimately they like to zig when everyone zags. Maybe Howie is onto something.
You're right. And I just hope it's not an overreaction. I'll just say, it's funny because as Eagles fans, we're so used to Howie that we always think of what Howie's going to say about certain things down the line. And I just have this fear that at the end of the year, Howie's up there at his end-of-year press conference. And say the year doesn't end with the Super Bowl. And Howie says, well, you know, what we did this past offseason, we got away from our core principles. We got away from what made us a great football team. We got to get back to building between the lines. We got to get back to building up front. That's what worries me about it. We've all heard the Howie speak. You could see Howie saying those exact words 5 months from now.
Well, who takes the shot, if you will? If that's the case, it would have to be one Nick Sirianni, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not Howie.
Wait,
Howie's not going anywhere.
Did you hear the other day, unless I am out to lunch, which it is very possible, I could have sworn I heard Nick Sirianni say the great thing about his new role, and I'm paraphrasing, is he gets to bounce around a little bit between meetings. Offensive room, maybe the wide receiver room, and the defensive rooms, but there's no chair, so he can't even sit in the meeting. He's the head coach. Dude can't get a chair. Dude has to stand in the back with his arms folded. He's the head coach of the football team, and he can't even sit in the meetings. He doesn't even earn himself a chair.
Well, that's interesting, and I think that's something we disagree on as far as Nick and his capabilities. So we'll get into that coming up next.
You think he can get a chair?
Oh, I'm still a Nick Sirianni guy. I'm still a Nick Sirianni supporter. Did I want him gone at the end of last year? Maybe. I was a little emotional.
I don't give a shit.
Looking back at it, I think Nick Sirianni's a good coach. I think that his track record speaks for itself. And in this environment, I think he'll be better set up to succeed. But we'll get into that a little more coming up next. Also, throughout the course of the show, we'll do some win total over-unders